morning session. So now we come to the important section on death and rebirth. And he opens with section 34 with the 4 causes of death. And so the arrival of death, or death, can take place through 4 causes. One is through the expiration of the lifespan. And this is typically what takes place inevitably for those beings who are living in realms of existence in which the lifespan is fixed. For example, especially for the beings in the Deva worlds, the lifespan is fixed, a certain number of celestial years or a certain number of aeons. So in that case, when that time span is up, then the being necessarily has to pass away. And also in the human realm, when people reach pretty much what we call the maximum lifespan, of course it differs from one person to another, but generally would be somewhere between 80, 85, even up to 100, could go up. Probably the absolute maximum would be maybe 120. There have been some who have lived to 120. Famous Chinese Chan master of the last 2 centuries, we have to say. He passed away 1950. He was born, I think, he passed away in 1959, so he would have been born 1840, I think. That's Xu Yun, Venerable Xu Yun. And so when a person of that age dies, usually they say that when he died of natural causes. So some other, external cause will come to cause the death. But it's just that the life has become so feeble because of the advanced age that it can't really continue beyond that. And so this is the expiration of the lifespan, then the expiration of the productive karmic force. And then the guide explains that this is the kind of death that takes place when the karma generating rebirth expends its force even though the normal lifespan is not exhausted and there are otherwise favorable conditions for the prolongation of life. And so it sometimes happens that the person takes rebirth with a karma that is sort of predetermined to give him a particular lifespan of maybe, let's say, 50 years. So even though the normal lifespan for a human being could be, let's just say, at least many people are living to be 80, 85 years old, and this person at the age of 80, something will happen, suddenly they get sick, or they get into I think if it's an accident, it will be a case of destructive karma. But if an illness comes, then it could be the expiration of the karmic force. Or sometimes people just die. Yeah, it could be like a heart attack. Maybe that's the death from heart attack or a stroke that comes. You mentioned the other day that booklet, N.K.G. Mendes, who wrote that booklet on the on Abhidhamma. I knew him personally. Yeah, he was a Sri Lankan man who was living in Nova Scotia, and he had 2 sons. His older son was playing baseball, football, soccer, whatever it is, on the on the ball field, and his son just suddenly dropped dead on the ball field. Then a couple of years later, his younger son was playing, football or soccer, whatever it is, on the ball field, and suddenly dropped dead. And the doctors examined both of the boys. They couldn't find any cause of death. So it could have been that in those cases there was some karma, very powerful karma. Or maybe this is not the destructive karma, but maybe the karma was already sort of imprinted in their rebirth consciousness, so that they were destined to pass away in early age. I think one was like 18, the other was 16 when they passed away. And up until that point, he had been just like we call a traditional Buddhist. But then after experiencing the sudden deaths of his two sons, then he really became interested in the Dharma. Okay, so another cause is the expiration of the karmic force. Then both could happen at the same time, the expiration of the lifespan and the expiration of the karmic force. And then the fourth cause of death, this is called the intervention of a destructive karma. So this is a term for the death that occurs when a powerful destructive karma cuts off the force of the rebirth-generating karma even before the expiration of the lifespan. So it could be that the death of those two boys was also caused by a destructive karma. That we can't determine for sure. Actually, looking at this, it would probably have to be considered a destructive karma, because it says the first three types of death are known as timely death, whereas the last is untimely death. Okay, now we're going to come to a detailed description of the actual process of death and rebirth. And so it begins with a person who is reaching the time of death. So in the case of those who are about to die, at the time of death, one of the following presents itself according to circumstances through any of the 6 sense doors by the power of karma. So what could present itself as one of the 3 objects of the death process that we mentioned earlier. One is the karma that is going to produce rebirth linking in the next existence. So some karma that one has done in the past. It could be a heavy karma. It could be a karma, some action done close to the time of death. Usually it's a habitual karma, and occasionally it can be one of these, they call it a kind of adventitious action, adventitious karma, some deed that we have done just on a rare occasion in the past, but for some strange reason it takes on the role of generating rebirth. So it could be one of these karmas, or it could be a sign of karma, that is some object that had been perceived and apprehended at the time when one was performing the karma, or something that was instrumental in performing the karma. So he mentioned in the case of the butcher, it could be his butcher's knife, or the sound of cattle crying, or the sight of blood spurting from the carcass of the cattle. In the case of a devout person, it could be a dagaba, or pagoda, stupa, or Buddha image. Okay, so this is the sign of karma. And that could be either something that was existing in the past at the time that one did that deed, or it could also be something that's presently existing. So if, say, the butcher gets a heart attack while he's in his butcher shop, then his eyes might just happen to focus on the butcher knife on the table. Or a person, a devout person who's lying on his deathbed, maybe they've set up like a picture of the Buddha next to his bed, and so his eyes turns to the Buddha picture and focuses on the picture of the Buddha. And then the third possible object is what is called the sign of destiny. That is a symbol of the state into which one is to be reborn. So if, as I mentioned, if somebody is destined to be reborn in the hell realm, it could be like the flames of hell, or demonic-looking beings with horrible faces and with long tails and with spears in their hands saying, "I bid you welcome." If somebody is to be reborn in the heavenly world, it could be like celestial castles or angels floating around or bright, beautiful lights. Maybe if somebody is heading back to the human world, they might see like a crowd of people at a shopping mall. Then they'll think, enough of this. I have to achieve nirvana before I get back into the human world. Okay, so these are the three possible objects. And then in the guide, this is an important point, it has to be stressed that this object presents itself to the javana process of the dying person, not to the death consciousness itself. The actual death consciousness, that's the absolute final citta, the citta which just puts a complete end to that existence. Its object is the same object as the original rebirth consciousness and bhavanga consciousness. So if I'm a human being, okay, I'll give myself a little credit. Suppose I'm going to be reborn in the heavenly world, and I was reborn, I'm a human being, so obviously I was reborn in the human world. So now the object of my rebirth and bhavanga consciousness has been all along the people at the shopping mall. And so the object of my death consciousness, the absolute, the chuti citta, the absolute death consciousness, is still going to be the crowd of people at the shopping mall. But now, as I'm approaching death, what starts to appear to my javana cittas is the sign of destiny, that is, the heavenly palace starts to appear. Okay, so it says the death consciousness, the final citta in the life term, apprehends the same object grasped by the rebirth consciousness and the bhavanga of the existence that is about to end. The object of the last javana process then serves as the object of the rebirth consciousness and bhavanga in the next existence, and becomes in turn the object of the death consciousness at the end of that existence. Now, what I've heard, I don't think this is written here, that you see the karma or the sign of karma or the sign of destiny already starts to appear to a person as the person is entering it doesn't appear only to the last javana process, but it starts to appear as the person is really getting very close to death. So it starts to appear more and more clearly. And what I'm told is that it's possible through speaking to that person, making suggestions, to change the direction of the death process. So if somebody, say, has done a mixture of good and bad karma, and now maybe through the play of conditions, bad karma is starting to take on that role, and the person is maybe getting some frightful images starting to appear. So while he's lying there, he's saying, oh no, oh terrible, terrible. Then one could speak to that person and start reminding that person, Johnny, don't be afraid, be calm, be tranquil. Remember that you have done so many good deeds. Or if it's a Buddhist, you remember you have taken refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. Think of the Buddha, the all-enlightened one, the one of great wisdom and great compassion. Think of the Buddha, think of the Buddha. Or else if he's a person who's done some meditation, you would say, just quiet your mind, focus on the breathing, just mindfully breathe in, mindfully breathe out, mindfully breathe in, mindfully breathe out. Or else you could tell him, if you know that he's maybe practiced some metta, or at least he's appreciated metta, you could tell that person, now think of all beings in the world and generate a mind of loving kindness towards all beings. Think of beings with kindness and compassion. So in this way, by talking to the person, one could sort of redirect the consciousness as it's approaching death. And what's often done in Buddhist countries is to invite monks over when a person is getting close to the end, and then they'll recite the blessing sutras, the Pirit suttas. So then as he's listening to the Pirit, it should be the calm, melodious chanting, it makes the mind get calm and uplifted with joy of Dharma. Okay, so now we continue into section 36. So it says, thereafter, attending to that object, and this is written in a rather scholastic style of the Pali commentaries, so I'll have to unpack it after reading it. Okay, thereafter, attending to that object thus presented, whichever of the three objects is appearing now to the mind, thereafter, attending to that object thus presented, the stream of consciousness, in accordance with the karma that is to be matured, whether pure or defiled, and in conformity with the state into which one is to be reborn, continually flows, mostly inclined towards that state. Okay, now once that object that represents the next existence, whether it be the karma that has come to mind, or a sign of karma, or the sign of destiny, once that becomes established, then the stream of consciousness as it's flowing on in the javana stage keeps on taking that object, that particular object or sign as its object. And so it goes on flowing, mostly inclined towards that state. And then it says, this is interesting, it says, or that rebirth productive karma arrives at the door by way of renewing. And then the comment on that says that the karma presenting itself does not appear just as a memory image of something that was previously done, but rather it appears to the mind door as if it were being done at that very moment. So, for example, a butcher who had been killing cows, if that karma of killing the cows is going to become the object of his rebirth, of his dying consciousness, it's not like he's just remembering, oh, in the past I used to kill cattle, but now it seems to him that he's right now, presently, in the act of killing cattle. And if somebody, a good person, maybe in the past he would be venerating the Buddha, bowing down to the Buddha image. So now it's not like he's just remembering that in the past I used to bow to the Buddha image, but now he actually sees himself as if he's engaged in that action of bowing to the Buddha. Okay, then the text says, to one who is on the verge of death, either at the end of the cognitive process or at the dissolution of the life continuum, the death consciousness, the consummation of the present life, arises and ceases in the way of death. Okay, then let's just go over to the guide to 37. So this explains that the last cognitive process begins when the bhavanga is interrupted. Then it vibrates for one moment, and the bhavanga then stops. Then following upon that, there will occur either a sense door process, taking as object some sense object that's presenting itself at one of the 5 sense doors. That is, if the object of the last thought process is to be a sign of karma, that some object connected with a karma one has done, and that object is present within one's vicinity, then usually it would be sight. The eyes will focus upon that object, and then one takes that object as the sign of karma. For example, to take the butcher again who's dying of a heart attack, so his eyes focus upon the butcher knife, or the devout person lying on the bed, his eyes might focus upon the Buddha image that he used to venerate all the time. So this would be a present object. Or else if, say, the devout person is listening while he's lying on the deathbed, some monks are reciting Pirit, and he's taking that as his object or the sign of the karma, then he'll take the chanting of the Pirit, the blessing sutras, as the object of that death process. Otherwise, it will be an object occurring in the mind door, even though it might take a visible form, but it's something apprehended with the mind, like the palaces in the case of somebody heading for a heavenly rebirth, or the flames of hell heading for somebody, the flames of hell for somebody heading for a rebirth in hell. Okay, so there follows a sense door process, taking as object some sense object at one of the 5 sense doors, or a bare mind door process, taking as object either some sense object or a mental object presenting itself at the mind door. Okay, within this terminal process, the Javana phase is rather weak because the person is dying, and so the heart base is weak. Whether you call it the heart base or the brain is weak. And so the Javana runs only for 5 moments rather than the usual 7. And this last process doesn't create new karma of its own, but it serves as the channel through which the past karma is going to perform the function of generating the rebirth. Okay, following the Javana stage, there might be or maybe not 2 registration chitas. And then there might be a return to the bhavanga, followed by the death consciousness, or it's possible that the death consciousness occurs right at the end of the registration chitas. Yes, as in some cases, the bhavanga may follow the last process chitas, some cases not. Whether it does or not, but right afterwards, then there comes the death consciousness. So then as the very last chitta, the death consciousness arises, performing the function of passing away from that present life. And then with the ceasing of the death consciousness, then the life faculty in that body is cut off. And then the body remains as just a mass of, now it's inanimate material phenomena, which is said to be just inanimate material phenomena, technically is said to be born of temperature, and continues as such until the corpse is either cremated or is reduced to dust. Okay, so that is the event of death. Now, what is happening? Now we come back to the text of number 37, going from the material side back to the conscious side. Immediately after that death consciousness has ceased, a rebirth consciousness of the appropriate kind, that is the kind that corresponds to the karma generating the rebirth, a rebirth consciousness of the appropriate kind arises and is established in the new existence, apprehending the object thus obtained. That is, its object is whatever served as the object of the last Javana process in the previous life. Whether it was a sign of karma, whether it was a karma itself, a sign of karma, or the sign of the new destiny. So it's apprehending the object thus obtained, either supported by the heart base, that is in all the realms of existence in which matter, material form exists. The consciousness, the rebirth consciousness, is based upon the heart, what's called the heart base. But in the case of, say, a human rebirth where the heart isn't formed yet, it will just be, even within, say, the one-celled organism, the fertilized egg, it'll just be some rather sensitive cytoplasm, is that the term? Some kind of material substance within that egg serves as the base for the very simple, for the rebirth consciousness. I'm not sure exactly when the rebirth consciousness latches on to the fertilized egg, whether it's at the moment of fertilization, the moment when the egg becomes, what is the word that they use? Viable, is that the word? viable? I'm not sure what it is. Okay, anyway, so in realms with material form, it's supported by the heart base. In the immaterial realm, it's without any base. And then that rebirth consciousness, it's said to be generated by a volitional formation. This is a sankhara. Yes, sankharena. It's generated by a volitional formation that is enveloped by latent ignorance and rooted in latent craving. So you could see here we have actually, in a nutshell, part of the formula of dependent origination. Here we have ignorance and craving are together as the two roots of the continuity of existence, and ignorance and craving are associated now with a volitional formation, a sankhara, which is generating the rebirth consciousness. And that rebirth consciousness in realms in which matter exists will arise simultaneously with name and form, nama-rupa. In the formless realm, there won't be the rupa part, but what arises is just consciousness together with nama. Okay, that rebirth consciousness, or that rebirth linking consciousness, is so called because it links together the two consecutive existences. That is, as the first moment, first conscious moment in the new existence, it links the old existence, which is just finished, with the new one that is about to start. And it arises, the citta always arises together with its mental adjuncts. That is, it always arises together with a particular bundle or package of mental factors. So at the same time that the citta arises, there'll be some feeling is present, some perception, some volition, even though at the very moment of rebirth it would be the most primeval, not primeval, but the simplest, the most rudimentary, almost negligible kind of feeling, perception, volition. Nothing really distinct, but just the very rudiments of these mental qualities are already there. And depending upon the particular type of rebirth consciousness, there'll be at least the potentials for other mental factors to emerge. Okay, then if we pass over now to the comment on page 223, it says, immediately after that has ceased. Okay, so following the dissolution moment of the death consciousness, there arises in a new existence the rebirth linking consciousness, which is the rebirth consciousness apprehends the object thus obtained in the final javana process of the previous life, the life that has come to an end. Actually, I already explained this. So this citta is supported by the heart base in realms which include matter, but is baseless in the immaterial realms. It's generated by a volitional formation, that is the karma from the previous javana process that is bringing about the rebirth. And that karma, in turn, is rooted in the two roots of samsara, ignorance and craving. And then the rebirth consciousness is conjoined with its mental adjuncts, that is with the chaitasikas. And it serves as the locus or foundation for those chaitasikas. Okay, now we have objects of sense sphere rebirth consciousness. This is section number 38. Let's see what the text says. Okay, it says, in the death proximate cognitive process, only 5 feebly occurring jhavanas should be expected. As I explained, because the heart base is weak, and so it could support only 5 jhavanas. Therefore, when death takes place while present objects are occurring and have entered the avenue of sense, then the rebirth linking and the life continuum, that's the first moments of life continuum in the new existence, take a present object. Okay, this is because in the Theravada Abhidhamma, as I said, the rebirth takes place instantaneously after the moment of death. So say if our poor friend the butcher, okay, he has looked at the butcher's knife as he was dying, and so that became the object of his last jhavana process. And so it's present, that visible form, with 17 mind moments. Remember, the butcher's knife itself, what the butcher is seeing, we call it the butcher's knife, but actually what he's seeing is a visible form. So that visible form has a lifespan of 17 mind moments. And so it enters the avenue of his cognition. Okay, then comes the 5-door adverting, then the I consciousness, registration, 5-door adverting, I consciousness, registration, investigating consciousness. So here we have 4, then come 5 jhavanas, so we have 10. And suppose, what is this? Wait, Paspavanga, vibrating, adverting. Oh, my mind is not working so well. It's getting tired. Yeah, please don't interrupt. Yeah, that's also part of politeness. When somebody is giving a Dharma talk, one shouldn't stand up and interrupt when he's speaking. Okay, Paspavanga, vibration, arrest, 3. 5-door adverting, I-door consciousness, receiving, investigating, determining. So we have 8. 5, let's say 5 jhavanas take place, 13. Let's say that the registration is not going to occur. So we have the death consciousness, that's 14. So now there's 4 spaces left for the lifespan of that visible form. So instantaneously, the rebirth consciousness takes place, so that occupies 1. Then the first 3 bhavangas of the new life occur while the knife is still existing. And so that form is still present, even though the butcher is now in hell, but he's not seeing the form anymore. But the form is still a present sense object. Thereafter, the form passes away. Okay, in the case of the sense sphere rebirth linking, when the object is a sign of karma or a sign of destiny perceived by any of the 6 doors, the object may be present, that is, if it's continuing to occur, or it may be past, if it's stopped occurring. Do we have a mouse here? Or? Okay. It may be present if the object is still occurring, or it may be past if the object has ceased before that sign appears. But karma as object is only past, and the karma is perceived only at the mind door. So even though the person might perceive himself performing that particular deed at the time of death, and it seems so real and vivid to him, but it's still a mental image at the mind door. And so since these are objects of a sense sphere rebirth, they're said to be limited or sense sphere phenomena only. Okay, now we come to the objects of sublime rebirth consciousness. This is the rebirth consciousness for those beings who are taking rebirth in the fine material realm, the jhanic realms of rebirth. And so the text says, this is now paragraph 39, in the case of rebirth linking in the fine material sphere, and now I'll have to explain this, could be a little misleading. It says, the object is a concept and is always a sign of karma. So too, in the case of rebirth linking in the immaterial sphere, the object may be a sublime state or a concept, whichever is appropriate, and it is always a sign of karma. Now the word concept here, it's a little misleading because the Pali commentarial tradition uses the word panyati, which is what we translate as concept. I think we have it in the Pali text. Yeah, if you look in the Pali passage, the first line you have the word panyati bhutang. Okay, the word panyati is what we translate as concept, but it has a somewhat broader meaning than what we understand by concept in English. Like we understand by concept something that involves like a mental abstraction from a variety of objects or things that share a common feature, or else a purely abstract idea in the mind. Now, in the attainment of the jhanic states, what functions as the object is what is called the jhana nimitta, or simply the nimitta, or patibhaga nimitta. And this is usually the form of some kind of ball or disc of colored light. And so it's from, let's say, our Western perspective, we say it's a light, something that one is seeing, but technically, because one is not looking at it with one's eyes, with the eyes focusing upon an external object, it's not classified as a visible form. Whereas when I open my eyes and I look at this, what I see is rupa ramana, the visible form object. If I look at this, it's a visible form object. But if I close my eyes, and then even if I could visualize with perfect clarity, say, the image of the Buddha, so I could see the Buddha sitting with a halo surrounding him, with his hands in the teaching position, a halo behind the body, cross-legged, very serene, peaceful, loving face. Even if when I could see that with perfect clarity, that's considered a concept, or it's considered a panyati, even though we would call that a mental image or a visual image. So even mental images or visual images are included under Panyati. Whereas we would think of concept of Buddha if I'm just thinking of a being who's fully enlightened, not the mental visual image of him. And so the object of the jhana is the nimitta. So it would be like that bright colored light. And it's classified technically as a panyati, a concept. And so that it's a sign of karma because it represents the jhanic attainments of the being who is to be reborn in the fine material realm. And that becomes the object of their rebirth, bhavanga, and eventually their death consciousness. Now in the case of the immaterial sphere, this is a technicality that I didn't explain this time. I think I explained it last year. The base of the attainment of the base of infinite space is achieved by taking the kasina object of the jhana, expanding it till it becomes boundless, and then making it disappear, sort of rolling it up or discarding it until all that remains is infinite space. So the infinity of space that remains as the object of that state is also classified as a panyati. Now it's said that the base of the infinity of consciousness arises by taking the base of the infinity of space as its object. So the second immaterial attainment has the first immaterial attainment, the mind of the first immaterial attainment, as its object. So it has a sublime state. It has a sublime citta, that is a immaterial sphere citta as its object, the second formless or immaterial meditation. The third immaterial attainment arises by focusing the mind upon what I'll call the unobstructed nature of the infinity of consciousness, that the infinite consciousness is without any obstruction or impediment. And so that is the object of the base of nothingness, that there's no thing there obstructing or impeding the reach of the infinite consciousness. And so this idea of unobstructedness is also a concept. So that, or technically it's a panyati, so it's classified as a concept. So that is the object of the third immaterial attainment. Then the fourth immaterial attainment, the base of neither perception nor non-perception, neva sanyaya sanyayatana, it takes as its object the mind of the third immaterial attainment, that it arises by focusing upon the mind of the base of nothingness. And so it also takes as its object a sublime object. That is, it takes the third immaterial state of mind as its object. So two of the immaterial meditative attainments take concepts as their object, or panyati. Which two? I forgot what I said. Which two? Okay, you don't have to give the explanation, just say which two.
And then the base of infinite
Buzz. Okay, you got the first one. Base of infinite space has a concept. Which other one has the concept? I heard it right, the base of nothingness. So those two, base of infinity of space, base of nothingness, have panyati, so-called conceptual objects. The base of infinite consciousness takes the base of infinite space as its object, so it has a mind as its object, and the base of neither perception nor non-perception has the base of nothingness as its object, so it also has a mind as its object. Okay, so for the beings who are reborn in these four formless realms, so those who are reborn in the base of the infinity of space, they will have the infinity of space as their object. The beings who are reborn in the base of the infinity of consciousness will have the infinite nature of the base of infinite space as their object. The beings who are reborn in the sphere of nothingness will have the unobstructed nature of the base of infinite consciousness as their object, and the beings who are reborn in the sphere of neither perception or non-perception will have the mind of the base of nothingness as their object. Be sure you get notes on all of us down, because nobody is allowed to leave tomorrow unless you could answer spot on. Surprise quiz tomorrow. Okay, now just let's finish up this chapter. Okay, then in the case of the non-percipient beings, only the vital monad becomes established by way of rebirth linking. The vital monad, we haven't yet met that term, but basically what it means, let's put it very simply, only living matter without any consciousness is their form of rebirth linking. And so they're called materially reborn, and those in the immaterial planes without any matter are said to be mentally reborn, and all of the others are reborn through a combination of matter and mind. Okay, now we take the next section, which is quite important. So this is going to explain what realms of rebirth are possible for the beings who pass away from any other realm. And so it says, when one passes away from an immaterial realm, one may be reborn in Maybe I should take this in the next section. Yeah, rather than try to rush through it. So let us be a little relaxed. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to end the retreat tomorrow at lunchtime, rather than go into the afternoon, because we're going more quickly than I expected. So we'll get through all of the material, literally, the chapter on matter, what I wanted to cover from that chapter. We'll be able to get through it tomorrow morning, hopefully by the first period in the morning. So then we have the second part of the morning for an open floor question and answer. Okay, so we'll take it sort of easy, and we could stroll at a leisurely pace over to the dining hall rather than try to rush through these last sections. and then leave everybody with, unanswered questions. Okay, so let us then end the morning session. Chime. Chime and time.